Sure, I'd be happy
Okay.
to. Hello, everyone. It's good to see you. This is going to be an exciting meeting, I think, and it's the first one, so there might be a few glitches. Bear with us, but Ellen's a terrific facilitator, so I think she's going to carry us through. The people that we had here today, I think, are Sheldon. Are you here?
Yes, I'm sorry, just had to take off mute.
Great. Clay?
Present.
Thank you. Alan?
I'm here.
Great. Bill?
Here.
Thank you. Kent?
Here.
Ian? I don't think Ian was going to make it, but he's on the list. Brad?
Here.
And Jennifer? Not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Great. And then just real quickly, the county folks that we have on the line, of course, a shout out to Luke, our IT tech who makes this possible. And Kelly is, hi Luke, and Kelly's at the county. Hi, Kelly. And Brianna is online. And Lorna with the attorney's office. Did I say that right? Is here. Hi, Lorna. Observing. Make sure we follow the rules. Thank you. And Bob, are you on the line too? Bob Batista?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Bob. To answer
How
any.
are you?
Good. And Bob, the county folks are here if we have any like technical questions to answer. So they're just here to help us like run the tech and you know, maybe answer questions we have. And then my iPad is here also. And I think that's everybody on the line.
Ellen, Ed
Yeah.
is there. Ed is here as well.
Oh, I don't see Ed.
Are you here, Ed? No, I saw his name.
You okay? I don't have him, but maybe he disappeared and will come back. I know he had wanted to attend.
Okay, it's still showing him as one of the participants, but he might be muted or no. Anyway, okay.
Okay. So, Andrea, do you want to say anything else, or do you just want me to dive into the agenda? What's your preference?
Ellen, I think you should just dive in. I think we've got a lot of work to do over the 2 hours. So please get started. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, welcome everybody. Also, I just want to acknowledge that in order to accommodate a variety of schedules, we're holding this meeting on a day when my husband is on shift at Meridian Fire. And so, you know, it's possible there will be some homeschooling interruptions, but I'll try to keep all that to a minimum. And just, yeah, so thanks for your tolerance if something like that should happen. But they've all got a bunch of grilled cheese and turkey sandwiches, so hopefully they're all set. Okay, so what we want to do today, like Andrea said, this is an experiment in subcommittees in that we have a great structure, but this is the very first one that we have had. So thanks for testing out this model and helping us perhaps refine it, although we will be consistent across the subcommittee. Before we move forward too much further, I believe this meeting is being broadcast, Brianna, to the public. Is that right? Okay. And is there anyone signed in or anything right now?
Yeah, it looks like we've got a couple people watching. Luke, I'm not sure what it looks like from your end. So Luke with Ada County IT is broadcasting it to Ada County's YouTube channel. I am broadcasting it to Development Services Facebook. And on the Facebook, members of the public can comment. And later I will send whatever comments are on there out to the committee so that they can see kind of what the public is thinking as they're watching this.
Awesome. So welcome to members of the public observing. And as always, a reminder that you can submit comments at the Ada County Expo Idaho project site on the Ada County website. And the committee sees all of those comments. They are compiled by the county and sent along to the full committee, not just the subcommittee. So keep those coming. with that, we are almost done with the welcome and overview. And then we kind of propose 3 steps. So one is, as a subcommittee, I think it's important for us to kind of recreate a list of what we see as the primary uses and maybe some of the secondary uses that we would want to focus on when we do our scenario planning. Many of you shared some comparable and aspirational research for inspiration. So we're going to look at what has been submitted so far, and then you absolutely can submit other examples after this meeting. We're going to give you guys, because we are on a, we want to keep this project moving, you'll have 1 week to share any pictures that you want to bring in as examples to this particular scenario. The bulk of the time we're going to spend with you all saying how you would like to map out the site. And I think I just want everyone to like sort of practice patience and tolerance. I think that can feel a little messy while we're doing it. But that's kind of what the creative process looks like sometimes. And that's definitely something we're going to be participating in during this meeting. And then at the end, we'll talk about what happens next, because the purpose of this is for your subcommittee to prepare something to present to the full committee at the end of October in our full committee meeting, also open to the public. And so we'll talk about, what are the steps to get ready to have our subcommittee, your subcommittee, make that presentation. So if that all sounds okay to everyone, with that, I'm going to move into us. Oh, and I guess I had this little note here on presentation deliverables. We can definitely adjust this as the subcommittee sees fit, but in order to create consistency across the subcommittees, we're imagining your presentation will have 2 parts, and one is a scenario board that's like maybe an annotated map with explanations of what would go where, and then perhaps an accompanying presentation that would highlight key points of the scenario. So again, we can adjust this, but I just want to give people a sense of what we are proposing that all the subcommittees be on the hook to produce. So hopefully that sounds good and not too onerous, and we're excited. Please feel free to jump in and stop me as I just keep the train moving. Okay, so as we move into our discussion, I just wanted to remind folks of this illustration that we looked at, and I'm going to zoom out here so we can check it out. At our last meeting of the scenario focus options. And this group is like the middle column B here. And 2 kind of framing things that the committee discussed at our last meeting. One is that many people in their site tour reviews and at the committee meeting noted that it isn't necessary that the uses be exclusive of each other. So for example, you can choose to incorporate elements of agriculture, outdoor ed, and city center into your rec event sports complex focus. So we don't intend for those to be necessarily exclusive. Hopefully that makes sense, yeah. And you can come up with, I guess, a couple alternatives to your scenario as we work through it. So not too many, but we do want to provide some options for the committee to discuss. And then lastly, just a reminder that what the commissioners tasked this committee with was bringing forward scenarios that then the public can weigh in on, and to help organize these options in a way that makes that conversation productive. And to that end, I know you all have probably your own personal interests that you want, but I also know that the committee has been very good about thinking about the community and the county at large. And I just want to encourage continuing to think about what the county community wants to see out of these scenarios. Okay, so with that, let's get into it. So I have 2 questions proposed, and I can call on people, or you can just jump in and start. But I'd like to generate quickly a short list of what you see as primary uses that would definitely be part of a sports and recreation complex scenario. So who wants to kick us off? Bill, Kent, Clay, Brad, Sheldon, Alan, Andrew.
Well, I'll start. So first would be a stadium. And I think the Hawks said 10 acres would suffice for that. Second would be parking for cars. And you can easily fit 1,000 cars on 2 acres vertically in only 4 levels. So 4 acres would do 2,000 cars with 4-story parking. And then question mark would be additional land for practice fields or other uses to complement or support the sports effort. But I see this whole sports complex taking up 20 to 24 acres, about 1/10 of the total property.
Did you say 20 to 24 acres? Is that
Correct.
okay? Okay.
Can I ask a question, Clay? Does that 20 to 24 acres, that's the stadium and parking and
And so that would include 4 practice fields, which would be about 6 acres. That would fit in 20 acres. So if you want 4 more fields, you could put it in 24 acres.
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks, Clay. I want to go to the next person, but this may be a good time to pull up a table that, due to like the kind of rapid scheduling of this meeting, I haven't had time to share out. But I thought for this group, this might be helpful to look at. And I'm happy to email it out and also refer to it. But what we wanted to give people a sense of is exactly what Clay is doing about how big are some of these parks, or maybe similar sized parks that exist. And these are full complexes, right? So, but you know, like how big are ponds and farm areas, the Taco Bell Arena. So hopefully there's some pools. I mean, I'm not trying to seed ideas necessarily. These are just things that have been brought up and we thought we would look for comparables of them. While I know we're not talking about a zoo, it's, you know, like a animal enclosures, interactive, that kind of thing. So I'm happy to move back to this if anyone is ever interested in looking at it. And just as a reminder, you know, the full site is about 245 acres, the Expo site. Okay, who would like to go next with their short list of primary uses?
I could jump in. Now, haven't drilled down to the acreages, but I agree with the things that Clay put out there. I think when we talk about recreation, I think more broadly than just the baseball and sports. I like the sports side, but I've seen a lot of comments about people wanting a concert venue. That could be incorporated into the sports stadium or designing that so you could do both, or it could be a separate. The other thing is that I always view the fair itself as recreational. So those are the two pieces that I would add to that. With the concert venue, if it's not the if it's not the stadium doubling for that, it would probably take about the same space. Parking would double for a lot of these different activities. And in the fair itself, we don't want it to be too crammed together. So we'd need to leave a pretty good space for that.
Okay.
Ellen, if I may, let me clarify some things that were behind my thinking. One is that the stadium is music, soccer, baseball, who knows, maybe it's a golf driving range, multiple levels. It could be a lot of things.
Yeah.
And other recreation, trails, bikes, peds, all of that stuff is integral outside of that facility throughout the rest of the property, and trying to minimize the amount of land used so that the rest of that property can accommodate those other uses.
Great. Yep. Okay.
One
So,
more one last thing as it relates to the practice fields, that could fall in, like we have talked about, moving the Lady Bird Park over by closer to the river, and that could be part of that move because those are practice fields anyway.
Okay. Nice. Okay, thank you very much, Kent. Let's hear from who's next.
I'd be happy to say something.
Yeah, Bill, please.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything that's been said so far, and Clay's right. If you look at the construction of any new minor league ballpark in the last 20 years, they have multiple components to them. And this one, I would certainly hope we would make convertible into a professional soccer field, since we have a professional soccer team kind of waiting online. So dual purpose there. And additionally, the youth sports fields that would be kind of around the stadium, I think there's a huge market for that. We have tons of regional events that are looking for venues, and this would be a perfect venue. And then you could use the stadium itself for sort of the championship game of whatever tournament was in town. And yeah, convertible into a concert venue for the fair or for whatever. You know, I've been to over 200 of these ballparks, and some of them are incredibly creative in what they've done with their space. I was at one this summer where the big Jumbotron in the outfield, of course, showed the game to the people looking at it, the seating bowl, but behind it, there's a big blank surface behind it, and they had converted the backside of the Jumbotron into a drive-in screen, and the parking that was there converted into parking to watch a drive-in show. So there's a lot of stuff you can do within the footprint. I went to another stadium, and I sent Brianna a bunch of pictures from some stadiums that I thought did some creative things. A lot of them have an outfield concourse for all sorts of things. One I went to had like 3 different miniature golf courses. So tons of recreational activities that you can put on a fairly small footprint and have a year-round sort of opportunity there. And depending on the design of the stadium, a lot of them are frequently used for other kinds of venues, whether it's meetings or conventions or weddings or swap shops or you name it. So I think it all comes down to the creativity you use when you put this thing together, and that's where a good architect would come in. But if the committee is interested, I could send you hundreds of pictures of what I think are well done stadia, and not just the stadia themselves, but the related amenities. There's hardly one that's built today that doesn't have a hotel in left field looking over the stadium, and condos or high-end housing in right field looking over the stadium. And in all of those cities that have that, they sell like hotcakes. It becomes very hot housing. So there's a ton of things that a stadium could anchor that would enhance the rest of everything that we're talking about. So.
Okay, great. And I have, Bill, thank you, your photos in this document. So we'll go look at those in a minute. I just want to make sure that we get down to the primary uses. So Brad and Sheldon and Andrea, is there anything else you'd like to add to this list of primary uses? And I'm going to move, Bill, your related amenities to the secondary uses, if that's okay. Yeah.
This is Brad. I agree with what's been said here. Appreciate Clay putting acreage numbers to it. That's very helpful. But having the multi-purpose stadium, fields, place for concert venues. The one thing that hasn't been talked about, I'll bring out, is event space. Expo Idaho is used for numerous events throughout the year. I think that certainly needs to not only remain, but find a way to expand. Looking to the future, using those buildings, maybe doing some other things, whether they're tent structures or other more permanent items to to
Mhm.
continue to have Boise as a destination for regional things that need that larger space than that a convention center can provide. So in agreement with everything else, but also trying to figure out a way to enhance the event opportunities there.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Brad. Okay. And let's see, Sheldon, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I went out and Googled stadium development projects just to see what I could find.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, what you found mostly were the $1 billion plus big football stadiums like the new one in Los Angeles. I did find one in Palm Springs, and much like Bill Connors said, the ones I found had what we've called, I guess, related amenities.
Mhm.
So I'm a little confused about in this list what's called a secondary and what's called a primary use.
Mhm.
I might put some of the things in the primary list in the secondary list.
Okay.
I'm not sure how you've drawn that line, but as I thought about it, and I know we're not supposed to consider financing, but I was thinking, this is the potential of a great complex, who's paying for it all? And somehow I think you have to have some of those related amenities so that you get a developer. I know we heard the Hawks say without significant improvement to this stadium, it probably will no longer be a minor league baseball team. And so I'm in favor of improving the stadium, and I'm just thinking to get that and to get the funding and get people interested in that, you may have to take some of what we've called related amenities and push them up to the primary group.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to move this back up here. For now, at least. That sounds good. Okay, thanks, Sheldon. Alan, you want to share?
Yeah, this is an excellent list. As far as adding anything to it, and when we were talking at the beginning of meshing with other scenarios, we're talking about making a destination. Some of the ideas that have come to me is when we're talking about doing a 4-H challenge course or a dog agility center or an equine horse education center. Those are, I think, some also pieces that could tie into when we're talking about destination, especially if it's also a corporate retreat, 4-H challenge courses across the country, that's their gig. I mean, it's obviously we're working with youth and teaching leadership skills and social and emotional learning skills, but that's also great team building for corporate teams. Another thing that I think about is just the opportunity a stadium provides when I'm talking about youth development. 4-H actually has a partnership with the United States Soccer Foundation where we're engaging refugee kids. And we went through a whole training talking about having those opportunities for kids to see sports, professional sports live. And so when we're talking about those opportunities, I think there's, with fields surrounding the stadium where it's that giving those opportunities for kids who may not otherwise have that opportunity. I think those are some good things there. And it doesn't, this could be primary, this could be secondary. I just wanted to throw those out there.
Ellen, I just wanted to make a quick correction up above at 4 practice fields. That's not 20 acres. That's more like 6 to 10.
Okay. Oh, okay, thank you. And I must have put, this is where you meant 20 acres.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And lastly, I think, Andrea, you want to add anything to this list?
I do, just, kind of crossing over as Alan did into primary and secondary. I think I kind of looked at the property on a larger scale, assuming the stadium was going to be included. So I was going back through the public comments and listing things that the public has said that they would like to see, like a fishing pond and natural areas, fitness trails, maybe a disc golf course, an off-leash dog park, a picnic shelter, volleyball fields. And, you know, one of the main things, I guess, and Clay, I liked your idea with the practice fields, and I don't know if this can be incorporated in it because it's a lot smaller size, but Little League uses those fields out there at Ladybird Park right now. And we still provide a space for them somewhere in this property. So those were my comments. I think we're on a good track here.
Okay, cool. And since a couple people have mentioned it, I guess we don't have to use these primary and secondary use categories. I'll just get rid of them. It kind of was like, sometimes that is helpful to say, here's the 5 things we want to focus our design around, and then here's some ancillary things we could add in. But I just eliminated those. So I also want to, on behalf of Ian, who couldn't be here but shared some things, he also had fishing pond examples that he sent in, which I assume means he's interested in that. And he also sent some photos of archery ranges. So with that, I'm going to ask, yeah, go ahead, Andrew. Sorry.
One more thing that I didn't mention, and I know Kent brought it up, and that is the use of the property for the fair. And I mentioned these secondary uses, I kind of see them as how the fairgrounds property can be used on a year-round basis when the fair is not in operation.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, I'm going to just, if it's okay with you guys, do 2 things. So I wanted to share the images that were sent by a few of you. So these Bill will recognize. He sent in a couple examples of ball fields, but also surrounding complexes. And Bill, I'll definitely pause here in a second and let you speak to any of these if you would like to.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, if you could scroll up to the first one there.
This guy?
So that, yeah, the one on the top there, that is the home of the new home of the Augusta Green Jackets. This is owned by the folks who currently own the Hawks, and this is a new build. It's convertible into professional soccer as well. They overlay the soccer field above that. But notice what's popped up around it. You got a hotel over there off of left field, apartment complexes right nearby, and according to those guys, they're pretty hot real estate right at the moment. If you,
sorry, hold on one second. Yep. Okay. Did you want to look at a different picture?
Sure. The next one is that's the home of the Dayton Dragons. That's in downtown Dayton, Ohio.
Sorry, I'm done.
It's become the best populated minor league stadium in the country, and they plunked it down. This doesn't really apply to us so much, but they plunked it down in the middle of an industrial area. And what you can't see in the picture is a whole lot of retail has popped up around it in an area of the city that is really decaying. So it was used as sort of an economic stimulus in this case.
Mm-hmm.
The next one, let's see what we got. All right, this is pretty recent. This is Franklin, Wisconsin. These are the Milwaukee Milkmen, a minor league team outside of Milwaukee. This one's probably the best example of what we might be talking about, because it's not just a ballpark. And again, this stadium is convertible into professional soccer as well. But not only is it a beautiful stadium, and that whole thing I was talking about with the Jumbotron and the outfield, in back of that is the parking lot, and they've converted that into a drive-in, particularly effective right now. They built that big hill over there in left field, and that is a ski hill in the winter. And what you can't see beyond the Jumbotron are a dozen Little League fields and soccer fields. So this is a whole kind of complex that they built. This was a county project, and I talked to the county commissioner who put this together. And what you also can't see is a whole mess of retail and hotel popped up around it as well. But they attract all sorts of tournaments from all over the state, all over the country, to use this sports facility.
Great.
Go ahead.
Okay.
This is one of my favorite minor league ballparks, and it shows you they don't have to be cookie cutter ugly. This is the Frisco Rough Riders in Frisco, Texas, and they built this sort of hill country architecture. And one of the cool things about this is they use this not just for baseball, but the buildings themselves are used for all sorts of events and meetings and weddings and all sorts of stuff. So they use this thing 365 days a year.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thanks, Bill.
Go ahead. Is there anything else?
No, I think what I was just going to show is these are Ian's not here to speak to this, but I just wanted to show a couple images that he sent. So this is a fly fishing pond with, I'm assuming these are kind of like targets for practice, you know, and just some pictures of what that looks like. And I know my time in Anchorage, Ship Creek, I think, is one of the few natural salmon run rivers in the middle of a city in the US. And it's lined, you know, the banks of that are lined with people fishing during the season, which is really a cool element for sure. And then Ian's also sent two images of a layout of an archery range complex, which I know, and many of you probably do know, there is one in the Boise foothills that I believe Boise Parks and Rec runs, but these look like a bit more involved than those. And so this is a different example with a dog park area and picnic area, disc golf course, walking trails, and then an archery plaza and range over here. So that I think is all the comparables we've had so far. But oh yeah, Alan, the Boise Bike Park is there, and they moved the archery range back to where the shooting range for BPD, Boise Police Department, had been, and then they moved that shooting range someplace else. So I think it's still back there, is my understanding. I could be wrong about that. Okay, but it was a well-used site. So again, yeah, go ahead. No, okay. So any other comments about these? And maybe, and if not, I'm just going to ask also if you guys have any questions for Bob before we move on in our agenda.
Can I make, this is Sheldon, just a general comment. Clear back to the beginning. One of the things I liked about the original space requirement, we have a lot of neat things we're thinking about putting on this site. I like the idea of a parking garage so that we can actually do more things on the site. Because that would take much less space than kind of frankly the way it is now, and allow for more of these items to be included.
Okay. Do other people have strong feelings about the parking, or do you agree with what Sheldon just said?
Well, just from an aesthetic point of view, you know, you got just acres and acres and acres of surface parking that really in such a valuable and beautiful piece of land, it just doesn't make sense. So yeah, anything we could do to consolidate that in some way, hide it in some way, to me makes sense.
I agree. The more we can make land available for people to use for their recreational purposes, whether it's the fair, whether it's the expo, whatever. And one of the comments I hear is, boy, that parking is so ugly. Can't you do away with some of that? This is a way of keeping the volume, but doing it in a more aesthetic way. I would be interested in what Bob has to say and what his priorities are.
Just before Bob, I just want to add to that, because I think that the parking garage, of course, is going to accommodate a lot of cars, but we also need to think about the congestion in the parking garage. I mean, you look at some of the ones downtown, And when an event ends, you know, it could be 30, 40, 50 minutes just trying to get out of the parking garage. So, and I think the parking garage is still a good idea, but there needs to be some surface parking as well.
Let me just comment on that real quickly. Andrea,
Yes.
that's a misperception. You know, the vehicles can only flow as fast as there are lanes in and out. So whether you have 2 or 4 lanes in a garage or 2 or 4 lanes from flat parking to get onto your access streets, you still have the same bottleneck getting onto Glenwood or Chinden. So really it's a function of how it's managed, and a current garage built with the right equipment and systems to have flexible lanes can be just as efficient as surface parking.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's a matter of design. It's I agree with Clay. It's a matter of design, and a lot of the garages only have one exit, and it's the same as the entry point. And if you have more than one exit and entry, that works too.
Okay. And if I can, not to overly influence you all, but just as a reminder, one of the things that has come up a lot in our conversations as a committee is wanting to integrate with the green belt, and maybe if there's an emphasis, and I guess I'm asking if you guys want me to add this on, making it more fun and accessible by non-vehicular traffic, that can ease congestion as well, and seems like would be part of the solution. Yeah, Brad, did you want to say something?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of this, where the parking garages go, where surface parking is located, how that fits in with a ball field, a multi-purpose stadium, with our natural areas to park for people to get close to, for the fairgrounds, event centers, and also the mixed use concept, I think, is all tied into this, even though that's a whole different subject. It's one of those things, to Clay's point, I think it has to be planned properly to be able to function well. Having spent 50 minutes, I think it was the Lincoln parking garage after a BSU event, is no fun to be stuck in a parking garage. So you want to, make sure it's functioning as well as possible. But I think it's going to be a mix of these types of things. And also we're looking at a mix of other things, as depending on where locations of these recreation event sports fields are located, how that gets apportioned out. So that was my only comment.
Okay. Yeah, maybe, I know like for flag, they do a lot of staggered start and end times and that kind of thing. Okay. And Alan had mentioned in the chat, so if people aren't checking out the chat, you may want to do that. Clay's made some comments as well. But just a reminder that natural areas really were emphasized across all of the ideas, that we've discussed, as well as just creating green space. So I put an exclamation point there.
Hey, Ellen, can I just make a quick comment? For the public that's watching, we're having some issues with our audio on the Facebook Live.
Okay.
So if anyone is, they probably can't hear that I'm saying this since we're having issues. But if any of the committee members are getting questions from people, emails, or hey, it's not working, it is working really well on the YouTube. So just send them that way. And I'm working to try and figure it out, but just so you know.
Okay. And it's working on the YouTube, you said? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Ellen, just to your point about, encouraging other forms of transportation in, I think there's an incredible sweet spot in this development for that. If you think of everybody and everyone on the other side of the river on State Street, and again, it all goes to design. And again, I've seen some stadia design where they now have entire bike sections where you ride your bike right into the stadium. You plunk it into a locked area, and you can sit on it and watch a game right from it. So there's great opportunities for getting a bigger population without their cars from the other side of the river over here on the green belt, now that it's bridged up pretty well.
Great. Great. Yeah, I mean, that just seems, just as a local, like putting on my local planning hat, that feels like what we need to be thinking about with any projects that we're developing is, there's a lot, you know, Boise has great weather, this whole area does. It's possible to bike and scoot and walk and, you know, to a lot of places, and it's good for us as people, and it's good for not having to sit in our cars and wait for events to get out. So I know it's not always possible, but some people will take that option, especially if we make it easy. Okay, with that, and you guys, I'm sorry to give you whiplash. I just want to go back up to our agenda here and thank you for that initial conversation and sharing the comparables research. So I think we're right on schedule if it's okay with folks to switch to mapping out scenarios. I did want to see, since Bob is on the line, if anyone had any questions for him before we move into that part of the mapping part of the conversation.
Mine was primarily just to see if he had any things that were at the top of his list to either keep or move.
Okay. Bob, do you want to weigh in on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think if you saw the video that I did, kind of explained a lot of where
Right.
I've had some visions about putting stuff, but I do agree with Clay and Bill that the parking lots are a tough one, and especially when we get snow here, a parking garage makes a lot of sense, but I do believe it all intertwines and interties with how everything gets laid out and the skill set of the architects.
Okay. And I know that probably everyone in the subcommittee was able to watch your video, Bob, and I certainly don't want you to have to recreate that interview, but for maybe the public that hasn't watched it yet, or just as a refresher for all of us, would you mind giving maybe like a 1 or 2 minute highlights of, you know, kind of the ideas that you've had, or, you know, as a manager of the space where you could see areas for change or improvement?
Oh yeah, I'll give you a quick overview. I still believe that we move Lady Bird Park back along the river, and free that space along Chinden for retail or residential. I am always been a proponent of having a sports complex or a amphitheater, and I agree with Bill and everybody that you can do a lot of things inside that space. I've come from several places that have done certain things like that. I believe that when you get that new stadium, then the Hawks place where they sit will become potentially a new Ada County administration office. The RV park, I think, stays just as at least temporary as a supplemental revenue stream for us. But I think that there's a lot of space that's parking that maybe needs to be redeveloped into something else, but we need a certain amount of spaces out here. And currently, when the fair is going on with Lady Bird Park, we have approximately 5,000 spaces. I hope that kind of gives you an overview.
You said 5,000 for the fair?
Yeah, by the time we take the surface parking and then we put in Lady Bird, it's about 5,000 spots.
Okay, and I definitely missed a few things. So I got Lady Bird Park by the Boise River, lots of things inside the stadium, RV park comment, parking. What did I miss though? I mean, what about the expo itself? I remember.
The expo, I've said in the interview that we are running out of space and running out of dates for people. We've turned already 36 people away from doing stuff, and that's not related to COVID. So there's been some talk that we need to improve each bay, and we've had some discussions with some architects and engineers about creating each bay, having its own ticketing system, its own food service, its own area, so that and we can enhance that by what we call putting saddlebags on the north and the south expo to give that added increase in space.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Bob while he has the floor?
This is Sheldon again, not so much for Bob. Ellen, would you go back to that nice graphic you had?
Bob, I'm going to get your title wrong, but I just want to, for the record, you're the Expo Idaho. Are you manager? Director. Thank you. Cool. Okay. Yeah, where did I stick that nice graphic? No, up ahead. Sorry. This guy?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.
Now, one of the things that is on this graphic that I just realized we haven't really talked about at all is the potential of maybe having the city center, Garden City Center, as part of, or at least linked with, or compatible with the sports complex. I mean, you've got a maybe on there. So I at least wanted to bring that up before we left primary uses or uses.
Okay, thank you, Sheldon. What do folks think? Is that something we want to add in here toward the bottom of the list? Or?
Well, you don't have to have it, but to me, given its location, it comes hand in glove.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's how they do the commercial and mixed use, those kind of things. Some of the things Bob was suggesting, like the county building out there, some of those things could, depending on what gets designed, come out as a city center in effect.
Okay. I
Yeah.
forgot to add that in his comment. So,
I also think,
yeah.
excuse
Go ahead,
me, Ellen,
Amber.
I just wanted to add that, we're talking about the Garden City Center, but I think there's also a need at Ada County for administrative buildings, and that could all be incorporated in the same complex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I would add that my vision for this would be to put the stadium and this mixed use commercial center at Chinden and Glenwood, and keep it easily accessible by vehicles from either roadway, separated as much as possible from the rest of the property, and let the rest of that property be filled with all the other uses and some residential and some parks and play off the river, and keep that urban sense where it belongs, and that's next to those busy roadways, and separate sound and activities from the other uses.
Okay.
Exactly.
And you guys, this seems like we should move to the map. Before we move off this list, two things. One, Alan, there is the University of Idaho like education center. Well, I don't know if you think of it that way, but you know, there's a building. And I wondered if you or others had a vision for, does that stay or get bigger, or, is it change form somehow as an outdoor or agricultural education center in this scenario?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on all the people that I've talked to, and also across the nation, most extension offices are very close or on the fairgrounds, which makes sense. Or they're usually attached to the county courthouse. And that's especially here in Idaho as well. So as far as our education, so I'm here in our extension office here. We definitely, and from our constituents, we need more space as well. We could be doing so much more to engage thousands more of Ada County residents. And so there's definitely an opportunity for adding teaching kitchens, adding more outdoor education opportunities, like's been said. I like the idea for the archery ranges, just getting kids outdoors as much as possible and interacting with the land. That's something that's missing, and from a lot of youth lives here in Ada County, and it needs to be there. So we definitely are. But I do think there's an opportunity for that to be incorporated in this as well. I don't think it's exclusive at all.
Sure. Okay.
Well, and I think I agree with Alan, and I'm a big fan of keeping that in that area. One big reason is that the Extension Service always has a big tie into the agricultural and into the 4-H activities, and that keeps them close to those activities at the fair.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Ellen, thanks again. I added teaching experimental gardens. Don't you have a little one already? Okay.
Yeah, so just real quick. So yeah, out of our office, we do 4-H, youth development, we do master gardeners, horticulture, we do urban agriculture, we do financial education, and we do healthy living and canning and food preservation. So that's kind of in our wheelhouse. There's opportunity to do more, but that's what we have capacity for right now. And so there's definitely opportunities to do more with, like what I mentioned, the dog agility, small animals, especially that's what kids can do here in Boise or just in Ada County. So.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So I'm going to move us on and give my video a second. So I just want to thank everybody for helping to generate that list. And I think it was important because we will want some accompanying narrative and, just words with whatever map visual we come up with. So thanks for helping compile that and share it together. So with this, I have us landing on the graphic that we have been looking at, but I'm going to turn all of this off and pull up this map. And what I was hoping we could do, and this is where we sort of get creative and potentially a little messy. I do still have these layers here if people, I don't think it's totally necessary. But what I was going to do is quickly walk everyone through these sub areas. I know you're very familiar, but there might be people on our call who are not as familiar, and then just get right into having each of you sort of tell me, like, I'd like to see, I'd like to see something by number 6, and I can just start kind of drawing in that sort of stuff. Does that sound good to you guys? Let me get rid of some of this stuff. Okay. So with that, our area 1 was parking areas in Lady Bird Park. This is Chinden. This is Glenwood, right? Area 2 is the former horse racing. Area 3 is some old, mostly kind of flood way, Sheldon, is that right? Right by the river. This is all riverfront. Then we had area 4, which is like near the Expo and some of the core fairgrounds with the Sky Ride. And then area 5 was the Hawks and RV park area. And then we had this little part in area 6 that houses North Ada Fire, Ada County Paramedics, University of Idaho Extension, and parking for Marigold parking lot for the Greenbelt access. Right? Okay, so that's my quick tour. With that, let's get into it. Who wants to go first in sort of mapping out what this would look like? Like after we're done placemaking the whole thing. And keep in mind, we're just going to the level of a concept diagram. So like some bubbles, we're not urban designers and architects. So we're not gonna be responsible for, totally ground truthing this. But Clay, do you want to start since you have acreages in mind, or?
Sure, I will.
Great. Go for it.
I just had to put my sandwich down. I would suggest that Area 1 be reduced to Lady Bird Park and some, but not all, of the south parking lot. So that section surrounded by Chinden and Glenwood, somewhere in there, less than that area, that's a big area, would be basically everything we talked about, with the exception of some of those secondary uses that complement sports. So, Frisbee Park, the playing fields, all of that green space I see as being located elsewhere. Could go anywhere. Could go in the middle of this whole thing. Could go close to the river. It could be both. But I'm just thinking from the sports complex and the urban center concept, that it's right at that corner, and just neatly designed for cars to get in and out easily. And then everything else surrounding that is designed for maximization of whatever the other uses are.
Okay, so you're putting stadium and events here. You're putting some kind of town center. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. And when you say town center, it means like housing and maybe shops, kind of mixed use?
I see a more commercial mixed
Okay.
use. So it would be expanded Ada County services needs. It would be hotel / retail to complement, that dense environment and the activity from the stadium.
Okay.
This is Sheldon, and I agree that Bill Connor's comment about having a hotel next to the stadium is great, and then that probably also drives it towards the town center idea too. They should probably be close together. So I'm in agreement.
And similarly, if the stadium complex could be fairly accessible to, and I'm looking at Area 4 now, to the Expo, to me, I agree with Bob that Expo could be expanded, improved, and it be a complement to the stadium facility. You could have your event going on in the Expo, and they could use the stadium for their opening night, event. Welcome to the whatever conference this is. So having easy access between the two. If you plunk a hotel or two in between those or near those, that drives both of those facilities.
Okay.
I agree.
Okay, great.
But I think a plus to having the commercial between the stadium and the road net is to buffer sound when you're having loud things like concerts. I used to live just up on the bench 2 roads up there, and some nights you'd get the concerts at the stadium so loud you could have all your windows closed and the TV on, and it was still drowning it out. So having some kind of sound buffer wherever the stadium goes.
Okay. Like around, this is what you're saying. Okay. I'm going to pause here and say, does anybody kind of like not have a different idea than how to use this area here? Or is everybody feeling that makes a lot of sense?
I have a curiosity question.
Mm-hmm.
So what would be the disadvantages? So when you were talking about hotels and stuff, I immediately thought to the east of the edge of the horse track, there's a bunch of lots or one lot of housing that's for sale. And then putting like, what would be the pot? Yeah. So right there, I don't know how much of that is for sale, but that was pointed during our tour. And then putting a stadium at the edge of the south end of the horse racing, like what would be the benefits, disadvantages of putting it there? I mean, this is a great idea. I was just curious on that part too.
Well, my first reaction would just be vehicular flow. So by having it sandwiched with Glenwood and Chinden, you've got that many roadways to escape north, south, east, west. Putting it where you've indicated makes getting cars in and out in large volumes more challenging.
Okay.
Coming into this, I was leaning more towards Alan's thoughts of having it over there with the horse racing, because we have had activity, recreational activities there, and there's a lot of room. But Clay makes a real convincing argument there about when it comes to circulation and traffic.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I think this is the river, right? Here. Yeah. In case that's helpful.
The only thing I'm trying to figure out, this is Brad, is the other fields, like the soccer fields, more of the practice field type scenarios. I certainly envision Ladybird going into the floodplain area, having natural areas, but then moving a little bit into the horse racing track area to pick up some like Little League fields and that sort of thing. Over in Caldwell, I think it's called Centennial Park. And it's not 10th Avenue, but it's if you take the overpass and then head west, like you're going to go to Greenleaf and Wilder out Highway 19, it's just as you come down to the overpass along the Boise River. On the right-hand side, they developed a park, and it's got restrooms and picnic shelters, but a couple of soccer fields. But I also noticed several years ago when the Boise River is flooding, it was overflow for the Boise River. It was in the flood zone, and they developed it to accommodate that flood. I kind of see the same thing here, where you can put in some fields, larger fields, and do that in the flood consideration zone, taking out all those stables and moving that into there, and making a nice play area, for that, as well as some of the things I hadn't even thought of, archery and those types of things, but creating a unique, diversified recreation area, but also making sure some of those areas remain natural and more just letting nature take its course type of thing along the river. So again, and of course there'll be associated parking up closer, and there is access points to it, but that would be down where you can also make parking for those playing fields, as well as Expo, Idaho, coming from what I call the backside.
Okay. Like the parking and access for backside. What do folks think of that? Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
I just wanted to agree with Brad. I had kind of the same idea in using part of that 2 and area to flow into the 3 to the flood area with the parks and the natural areas and the fishing pond and probably some educational or I'm not sure, some kind of a small venue, a small
like a outdoor classroom or something.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
And I don't know, we really didn't talk to the city about Garden City about the library. If, what are their needs at the library? I don't know if that building should stay where it is or if it should move over into that area as well.
Okay, I can go back and add that to the list later. I guess, Brad, since you're kind of leading this part of the conversation, do you see this blue line? Are you talking kind of like this, Brad? Here is like where this more natural outdoor fields complex is?
I would leave the RV park where it is. I mean, there is that revenue aspect we have to keep in mind. But probably where the number 3 actually is, there's a bump out there and the green belt runs along there. It widens out towards the river and it's a more natural area. And you could still create more natural areas where those stables are, just to the northwest of the number 3, where it says outdoor classrooms, and create some things that would work there, and then make that more southeastern part, as you tie into the current or former racing area, more of the active recreation as opposed to passive recreation.
Okay.
I guess that's my thought. One area more passive, the other area more active recreation.
Okay, so is this red zone kind of the right boundary, or does it go up higher by the 3?
No, that could be an active recreation area. Or also, I also see that the town center and commercial, if need be, can expand to the east of parking lot number 1. Or the area number 1 where the parking lot is, and going east a little bit too. It just all depends on how some of those things shake out.
Okay.
Hey, Ellen.
Yeah.
Can I just hop in for just a quick second? I'm just kind of watching. As you guys know, Ian and Matt, neither one of them were able to come today, so I'm kind of jumping back and forth between the comments that they sent us while we're doing this mapping thing, so that we can make sure that their comments are kind of in here too. But I just want to note that Ian did mention the fishing ponds where that, is it a drainage pond? I'm trying to remember what it is out there in the former horse racing. So just to keep in mind, that is something that he mentioned over in that area, which kind of tracks with what you were saying, Brad. And those emails, by the way, with Ian and Matt, I'll send those out to the committee later once we compile them and whatnot. So you guys can see those.
And Ellen, I
Okay.
just wanted to make a general comment. I know our task here is sports and maybe city center / but I see this property as a huge housing opportunity because the community needs housing badly. And housing takes up quite a bit of space and is a very different use than a very busy expo or a very busy stadium urban area. So if housing is to be a prime element of this total development, this is where I get confused about where to put stuff. And this is where you really need professional designers, urban designers, to come in and say, these uses are distinct enough and should be separated by this. You need access for vehicles, people, bikes, etc. So I just want to throw in the housing conversation because to me, we would be remiss if we didn't put a significant amount of housing on this site. And then where everything else fits, you've got floodplain issues and everything else combined. I lose track of even suggesting where everything could go except for the commercial town center and the stadium.
Just to echo that, I think when we get down to, hey, how are we going to pay for this? You're going to need some housing element in here to, to generate money for the county in terms of property taxes. And I agree with Brad's sort of, let's make some active recreational use, but that's also a good place for potential housing. I'm not one of the people, and maybe I'm in the minority, that's crazy about the RV park being there. I think you can make a hell of a lot more money in income for county taxpayers than the whatever it is, $800,000 a year coming from that, with a much more beautiful and aesthetic opportunity there, and maybe that's housing. But
again, this is Sheldon, and I agree with you, Bill. I look at that RV park and I see a really prime area along the river, and I think somehow that ought to be for people who live in Boise and Ada County.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird part of that Greenbelt walk, at least from my point of view.
And I do believe that we're looking at enough different revenue opportunities here that would offset whatever's lost by the RV park.
Okay.
And I'm certainly open to that. It's just a matter of they have to have that income stream. If it's sold off as opposed to leased off, and you compare what do you have for, the ROI in 10 years, it's a matter of making those numbers work. So I see that as a possibility if those numbers can work.
I have a little bit of a different viewpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I think this area needs to be preserved as open space, as open as it can be without the housing. The RV park, to me, if we're going to have a stadium and a commercial center, town center, if we're trying to attract people from outside the area, it's the only RV park in this area. It's the only place people have to come if they're in an RV. And besides that, it's also used for some of the events that go on in Expo, Idaho. There's a lot of people that come in their RVs. Personally, I think it needs to be expanded to increase the revenue.
Okay. So, and yes, this is a good example, you guys, of where we can make one or two bubble diagrams where we have kind of, here's our main idea, and then here's some variations on it, right? Like here's a couple things we talked about, and one can be that for now at least, we don't know about the RV park, and that might not be something that the subcommittee or the committee fully answers, to be honest, because I think I don't want to get into a discussion of the finances of the RV park versus property taxes. That is definitely a step that needs to occur, and I know the commissioners want to look at that. But those are two really different kinds of income that can be spent in really different ways. And so, I think that's not for us to answer, but I think the thing that you're talking about is you want to look and know about the fiscal impacts of RV park versus no the RV park and property tax income from this kind of development, right, in an ongoing way. I also think we can leave a note that says, because as Clay points out, we're not experts in integrating housing, so we can certainly suggest locations for that if that's something that the subcommittee definitely wants to see incorporated, but we don't have to have 100% answer for it. So just to relieve any stress. So I think it's enough to say we want to have housing in here. And I guess I would be curious, when you guys talk about housing, what are you imagining? What are you imagining when you say housing? Whoever's thinking of housing.
Well, I'll speak up. If you go down the river a little further toward Boise, down Chinden, to see what they've done with that, I forget what they call it. I guess it's called the waterfront. You know, that's interesting. You know, and there's a mix of housing in there. There's affordable, and and it's nice, and it complements the green belt, and it's beautified that area. That's the kind of thing I would be thinking about.
Yeah, I agree. And I would also say that in the commercial center itself, there'll be rooms for residential there. So this could be a mix of both single family, high density housing and multifamily ownership and rental. It could be a great mixed income housing opportunity for the community.
Again, I point to just dozens and dozens of ballparks I've seen where the condos in the outfield are amongst the hottest real estate in those respective markets. And I think that's an easy fit for multiple units as well.
Okay.
And I've been to a few of those where they have the downtown stadiums, Memphis and Oklahoma City, a couple. And those do draw really good, both commercial and residential in the areas that I've seen.
Okay, great. And then maybe for those of you like Andrea who are are not convinced about the housing component per se, do you want to talk about your thinking there?
Well, I go back again to it'll be interesting, I think, to have that as one scenario and let the public weigh in. If you look at the public comments we've had thus far, the housing is one of the minor uses that have been mentioned by the public. I really think that overall, the majority of comments that we've received thus far is more park area, open space, recreational use.
Okay.
So, again, it'll be interesting to see how the public weighs in when we have some scenarios to review.
Cool.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely, but I would add that survey after survey in our community indicates the two biggest concerns of citizens is affordable housing and transportation.
I agree with that, Clay. When you say affordable housing, though, when I hear what Bill's saying about like some of the condominiums, the townhomes that are on 36th Street, I'm not sure how many people think that's affordable.
Well, this is a long conversation, but the key to affordable housing is inventory. The more inventory you have, the lower the prices get. So even adding expensive housing helps lower housing costs, which sounds counterintuitive, but this would have to be mixed income. This would be a smattering of workforce housing, low income housing, and market rate high end.
And
Andrew, go ahead, and then
one more point, because I'm thinking still if Garden City Hall and Library are moving, there's going to be, maybe we can work out a trade. I mean, there's an opportunity for the space that they have there, either for housing or for the RV park.
And Ellen, I think you talked about options. I mean, what we can do, we're providing options to the commissioners. And, we don't know all their priorities when they look at this and what their involvement with Garden City will be. because as Andrea mentioned, affordable housing may be for those people who have chosen to live in an RV, or for those whose circumstances have forced them to that. What place do you give them? And that's part of their priorities to determine. So I think if we provide it as an option, as well as those financial financial information on what housing would look like in the different forms, and then they just have to decide what they want to do moving forward. So I'm comfortable with just providing both options and let them follow up on that.
That sounds great. And thank you, Brad and Clay. You both said things that I would have brought into the conversation too, and Andrea. So thanks for making those points.
Ellen, I'd like to throw one more thing on that, and I agree with them on what's been said, but I think another important thing is with this proposal, we're putting in a lot of things like we've talked about fishing ponds and archery still has adequate space.
Okay.
One additional comment would be Ada County's built that parking lot adjacent to the Greenbelt, and it gets heavy use. And I can only imagine in years ahead, especially with some of the uses we're contemplating here, that parking lot will continue to be well used as a primary access point to the Greenbelt. So I hope we keep it there and maybe even add a little more space as demands require.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And one other idea in that the old Hawks spot there is for 4-H use.
Mm-hmm.
On the tour that I was on, I was with Sadie, and she talked about how the 4-H kids, in order to care for some of their animals, they have to travel to 3 or 4 different places depending on how many animals they have. So maybe there's some opportunity there for more space for them.
Okay. So if you guys will bear with me here for a second and also help me as I do this, I'm going to try this. So this is a jumbly mass, but all the ideas are there, right? And I'm not going to try to totally fix it here live time, but I do just want to make sure that I try to the best of my ability to capture our thinking, right? So it feels like we are saying, okay, we are talking about kind of combining, thinking of this area here, right, as Expo, Idaho, stadium, kind of town center type of complex. Is that right?
Yeah, but it seems very big to me.
Okay.
I wouldn't carve out that big of an area.
Okay, so let me just do this. This is Expo, Idaho, more or less today. So maybe that stays or expands a bit. Is that right?
Well, I don't think so. Bob would have to answer this, but it seems to me Expo Idaho is literally just the building and maybe room for expansion of the building, and parking and everything else can be rearranged.
Okay. So maybe Bob, if you are still here, because I can't see everybody, maybe does that seem like a good space for Expo Idaho approximately?
When I did my speech there for you guys, Expo Idaho, that's what we use in the off season when we don't have the fair. That other green piece to the left is where we have all commercial vendors, all carnival people, and some areas where we use agricultural stuff too. So yes, that's one separate part of it, but collectively when it comes to the fair, I need both of those spaces. We need about 85 acres.
Okay, is this roughly?
But that's including the fair.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
including the fair.
I'm going to jump the gun and say I think the fair and all agricultural uses belong in a different location altogether.
Well, we all have opinions.
Well, do you guys want that to be one of the alternatives? Like, are we in this committee, are we saying sometimes the fair kind of the facilities that are related to the fair and agriculture stay, and then in another one, maybe they move? Or where are folks at on that?
You know, Ellen, I go back to your the groups that you had together with the rec event sports complex, the mixed use. To me, one of the primary purposes of this property was the fair. And some of that green area that Bob was talking about that you just circled, like the carnival area, it's possible that some of that could move into the flood consideration zone and the park area during fair time. I mean, I don't know that it has to be right there, but I agree that he needs, you know, when he interviewed with us, he was talking, you know, 85 to 100 acres. So I'm still supporting that this group, this rec event sports complex group, includes the fair.
Okay. Thanks, Andrea. Other thoughts, Bill, Brad?
Yeah, this is Brad. I've always included the fair and Expo Idaho remaining here. Looking at the former horse racing track site as kind of the flex space for expansion of the fair and the other things. If we put in the commercial and the other recreational, it's kind of it's going to be in flux right there because that's a nice area. I mean, there was talk early on of moving the fairgrounds completely out. You know, just with my taxpayer entity hat on, it all comes down to dollars and where do you find the dollars? And that's just a hurdle that's a little too large to overcome in my mind. Putting it out there as an option for the commissioners to consider is certainly appropriate because that is an option. But I think under the constraints that we're looking at, unless we know there's going to be enough revenue from this to relocate, you know, that's that's why I think we're looking at this with this remaining intact and flexing it as needed.
Okay. Yeah, Bill?
Well, I just, you know, philosophically, it's a good point. I mean, let's face it, this is an urban area now. Maybe it wasn't 30, 40 years ago, but it is now. So hauling livestock in and out of a heavily retailed, heavily traveled, heavily trafficked area is, you know, probably not consistent right now. But if there's a way to make the fair thing work on this piece of property with all the other stuff we're talking about, you know, God bless. But I'd also urge people to say, hey, you know, there might be more agriculturally suited areas of this county that might want to host a fair. Yeah, I think it's just a matter of how do you make things work in what's now a largely close in to downtown Boise piece of property.
I remember especially one of the presentations I was watching you guys gave last week. We talked about how the Ada County facility made sense going here because the population was shifting west. So I'm agreeing with you, Bill, that the potential for this becoming a prime center, not only of Garden City, but of Treasure Valley is significant. And so I'm just afraid with all these uses we've drawn on here, we're going to run out of space. And so I'm also in favor of at least considering the financial potential of moving the fair.
Yeah, I want to add two thoughts. I'm all about higher and best use for both the users and the land. So let's talk land first. The highest and best use for this land, given its location and proximity to density, is not a fair but mixed use development that generates an incredible amount of revenue and activity for more urban-like activities. But I also believe for the users, there's a much higher and better use for the fair in a location that's further west and maybe combined with the Canyon County Fair that becomes one central fairgrounds for the entire region and instead of having two different ones. And I think that it would be eminently affordable based on the value of this land or the potential value of its use. And I also think the users would find it much more attractive to have all the space they need easily accessible from the freeway.
You know, I came into this sort of with leaning that way that Clay was talking about of moving it someplace, but at the end of the day, you can't move just the fair. It won't carry itself. It's a once a year thing. Even with the 4-H and some of those other things, it's not going to hold itself if you just throw up a few tents. And at the end of the day, you know, moving it to Canyon County is saying, okay, let's tell the commissioners just to get out of the fair business altogether. I don't think that's an idea. Where I grew up on the other side of the state, every county had its county fair, but then things, you did good at your county fair, and then you went to the bigger ones. On Eastern Idaho, it was to the Blackfoot Fair. To here it's the Western Idaho Fair. But back to my main point here is that if you just move the fair and nothing else to support that through the year, I think it'll be dead in a year or two.
And I didn't mean to say it goes to Canyon County. I meant that it goes west to a location that could accommodate both. Obviously, Canyon County would have to agree to this, but I just think there's a better situation for livestock and agricultural uses outside of an urban core.
Yeah, well, and what I'm saying is you can't move just the livestock. You've got to keep something else beyond the livestock and the fair to keep it, have a good return on investment.
Well, maybe, but maybe there's enough revenue generated from this site to subsidize that other location. And how do the other county fairs,
Okay,
how do they manage?
Okay, hold on one second. So let's, I think we've talked through the fair, the folks that have talked. I do want to give like Alan or anybody else who might want to weigh in on that. But here's what I'm hearing from the conversation is that the way this is being planned, it's possible that the fair continues to be integrated in the site, at least in the short term, and perhaps it transitions out of here, or at least some of the uses transition to a second site. That's an option that some of you want to put forward for consideration by the committee, and then potentially for consideration by the public and ultimately the commissioners. So is that a fair summary? Is that a summary that reflects the conversation? Do you know?
Yes.
That works for me.
Yes.
I think we need to give them all the options.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say I would definitely be cautious.
No, that was Alan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Alan.
Okay. Yeah, I would be cautious
I
about the. Oh, is Ellen still there? I'm
Can you guys hear me still?
Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead, Alan. Okay.
Okay. I was just saying I would be cautious about the. I agree that's an option. That was an option that was stated from the beginning. Everything is from one end of the spectrum to the other. However, I agree. I would be cautious on the cost. I would be cautious on the almost separate but equal kind of thing about that. I think that it's important to consider the role that agriculture has played in the Boise Valley, and taking that out of the heart of this area would, I don't think, be a very long-term forward-looking thing to do. Kids that are doing livestock want to come to this area. They want to be able to showcase their hard work to people who've never been exposed to that before. And so I think that's something that's really, when we're talking about positive youth development, the needs of the community, the needs of people in Ada County, this is a huge parcel that I think everything that's being talked about is possible. It's not just an all or nothing scenario. I don't think, I think there's a lot of opportunities to really work together and integrate, because urban agriculture is a thing. People are moving to this area because they want that. People want that resource. People want to be able to experience, especially during this pandemic, people started gardening again. People bought out all the chickens from the stores. People want that agricultural experience. The corn mazes that pop up in the fall every year, those things are hopping. People are craving that connection to agriculture, and this property can provide that. And so I think that's something else to keep in mind. I agree that all options need to be displayed. We can't just be narrow-minded, but at the same time, I think we need to be open-minded to, that there are opportunities to expand even the agricultural presence and educate the public on the needs of our community and how we rely on the food we eat every day.
Did we lose Ellen?
Nope, I'm here.
There she is.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. Okay, does anybody else want to add anything to the conversation around the fair?
I'll just point out one last thing. Canyon County Fair went through the same thing not too long ago, and they were actually considering moving their fairgrounds, I believe it was 5-10 years ago, and they found land in Canyon County too cost prohibitive to even make that purchase and that move. And so I think if we're looking at doing the same thing here, prices have only, you guys already know, exponentially increased. So it's really, if that's an actual option, I think, I don't know who pointed out earlier, the cost would really need to be analyzed.
Okay, cool. Let's see. So hopefully I'm filling this out correctly. So we have this active rec area and what I think we're calling passive rec and natural areas, right? Oops. Is this seeming correct to everybody? And then my understanding, stop me if any of this is wrong. My understanding is maybe this area here is kind of like maybe a little bit like could be a common, some use that's compatible with fronting on Glenwood, right?
Mhm.
So this could be a mix of housing, maybe services, kind of complex. Although I do recognize, I think we had also talked about some that being here, like maybe the county, right? Or Garden City. Okay. And then the last thing I was going to put in here, again, stop me if I'm getting any of this wrong, is this zone here. And I'm going to overlap it with the RV park a bit, is where we see like greenbelt access, maybe RV park stays or becomes part of a natural area, right? Natural area. And we would like to keep, well, and I have these EMS and fire services there, and that maybe the University of Idaho kind of like outdoor classroom, is that, or outdoor complex or something like that? What would I call it, Alan?
A lifelong learning center.
Okay.
We're all about the informal education, so getting people life skills. That's good.
Okay.
So we're forming an LLC.
Okay.
Yeah, I like that. One other minor detail, we show the fishing pond, and that's good. And there's a return flow that feeds from there back into the river. And frankly, you might want to, that might be all part of that we might want to highlight that and not hide it as it winds through back to the river.
Yeah, I don't know where it goes exactly, but thank you.
And I still think there needs to be a dog park there somewhere.
Okay. Yeah, I can add, well, we have a bunch of things on our list. I won't try to stick them on this picture, but we will meld those two things together. I'm going to try to turn my camera back on. I think I was having a connectivity issue and I didn't want to collapse everything. So if it gets slow again, let me know. So I do want to ask as we wrap up the mapping, first, congratulations, everybody. It does feel like while we had a couple variations about the stadium location and how to include the housing, and certainly active discussion about the RV park and the fair, that this does feel like a coherent kind of conceptual diagram of uses. Do you guys agree with that? Would you as a subcommittee all be comfortable putting this forward? And then Andrea, I think we are going to ask you to like call a roll to make sure this is reflecting the conversation correctly. So that's the question, is that do you guys as a subcommittee support this conceptual diagram?
I do, as long as you've got that note about housing, because it's not listed anywhere else on that map.
Yes, like this, can you see this question over here? I will put that back in.
Yeah.
Okay, so just, yes, I'll make sure to say place throughout, or where should it go? And I had that other note about maybe it goes, was it kind of like
my only point is you got specific things spelled out like archery fields, but I would assume somewhere in here there'd also be some housing.
Okay. But
Otherwise,
maybe it's just housing. That goes in here.
Yeah, just I don't have an answer to this, and maybe Bob knows this answer. How many of this 245 acres is actually developable, and that means out of the floodplain? What's the real amount of ground that we have to work with to add vertical development? And I ask that because then this conversation may change dramatically. If an urban center stadium takes up 24 acres and there's only 175 available, it suddenly becomes a much bigger percentage. And then if you need 85 to 100 acres for fairgrounds, et cetera, or fields and archery and everything else, and pretty soon you have to say we can't do that here, and you have to eliminate something. It might be housing, it might be who knows what, but I'd like to know what that actual developable land is.
And Clay, Bob Batista, I don't know that I can give you an answer to that. I can certainly take the floodplain map. I think probably Development Service can maybe find out where everything lays in the floodplain and the floodway and maybe give us a better answer than I can through maybe Google mapping something.
Yeah, and even if it's plus or minus 10 or 15%,
sure,
it's better than
Can I offer a little help?
Yeah.
We need to define the two different terms, floodway and floodplain. The floodway is probably something you can't change a whole lot. The floodplain just means that maybe you have to elevate whatever you put on that area so that it's above the flood. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that you can't use that area. It just means it would have to be modified a little bit more. But the floodway, which is on some of the maps we've been shown, is probably something you can't change easily. I hope that helps.
Yeah, so the question again is, realistically, how much land is there to develop with vertical without costing a fortune? And it's great, but some better number than 245 acres, because we know that's not right.
Sure. All I'm trying to say, Clay, is I would look most closely at the floodway as an area you can, and then the rest, I think we have a little more flexibility on.
Got it.
So Sheldon, maybe a way to answer it is your knowledge of the floodway and floodplain. We're not asking you to guarantee anything, obviously, in this conversation, but would you think that this conceptual diagram could probably work around the floodway and flood situations?
Sure. The yellow area is generally where the floodway is, and we're showing that as active recreation, which I think that can be made to work.
Okay, so housing on these yellow slashes here is like maybe not as easy, but some of these other uses would work. I put this in as like maybe waterfront style housing.
Where I'm not sure where you're showing that, Ellen. I'm sorry. The orange.
Yeah, this.
That's probably harder right there.
Okay.
You can do stuff in the floodway, but you have to prove that if you do that, you're not going to put the water somewhere else or raise the water level somewhere else, and that gets harder. So, yes.
Okay.
Probably not. Where you've got that housing there, river access housing, probably needs to move back a little.
Okay. So just take this, sort of back it up a bit. Okay. So with that, I think any other notes or discussion before we affirm that we're kind of comfortable with this as a concept to show the committee? Any last comments? Okay. Andrea, do you mind?
Not at all.
Great.
Just 1 second here, making a note. Okay. Sheldon, you agree with this concept?
Sorry, I was struggling to get mute off. Yes.
Okay, Clay.
Yes.
Alan.
Yes, I believe this represents our discussion.
Bill.
Yes.
Kent.
Yes.
Ian. Oh, Ian's not there. Sorry, Brad.
Yes.
Okay, and then I agree that this is what we have talked about, but I just want to say one other comment that we have these 3 subcommittees, and I feel a little bit like our recreation event sports complex has sort of been sidetracked a little with the mixed use center. So it's going to be interesting to see what the 3 different subcommittees come up with, but
yeah.
Thank
you. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to switch back to the Word document, and it will be interesting. And so I'll stop sharing my screen here, and we will get wrapped up. And thank you, everybody, for weighing in, and I hope that was fruitful. Okay, so here I go, sharing this back to this last document. Okay, so quickly to recap the ground that we have covered, we started out with coming up with a list of the kinds of uses that we might fit on here. And then we mapped them out in general areas where they might go. Just a reminder, we, again, are not an urban design set of experts that would ultimately kind of come in and help figure out the costs and the layout and a lot of engineering and other technical considerations. So I think we've done the job that we were tasked to do and set out to do. Looking forward, I wanted to ask this subcommittee to consider doing a couple things. One, if you have additional aspirational or comparable examples of any of the uses we talked about, please do email those to, I think Brianna and Kelly will be compiling them, because we do want to share them back out with the committee in a packet. And so anything you submit will get shared. I'm in particular, I think if you have examples of housing, since we had such a good conversation about that, that would be great. If you had even local examples of the different kinds of housing that might fit on this site in your mind. The second is we will do a little bit of ground truthing of some of the technical details to get a sense of like, you know, is what we're talking about, and Clay has already really helped us a lot in this area, is what we're talking about really going to fit, right? Does the acreage kind of make sense? And I think we'll go back and look at where the floodway line is just to incorporate that detail into the map. What we're talking about producing for the committee, for the committee's consideration, is this scenario board that might look a lot like what I drew, only tidier. And then some presentation that might have, draw from the pictures that you all used of like what each of these sub areas we identified would have within it. So rather than get the subcommittee together again, I wanted to ask if you guys wanted to do that over email. Like if you wanted, what I could do is take a pass at redrawing that map and then putting your pictures together by sub area and sending that back out over email. So my question is, two questions. Does that sound like the right set of products to explain our discussion for the committee's consideration? And would you like me to work with the county on producing a draft of that? So thoughts on that?
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
I think we can give that a try.
Okay. Are some of you feeling like you might want to get back together to review the presentation before we meet? Or do we, what are you thinking?
Well, if you're producing something, Ellen, and we can look at it, I'm fine with that. I don't know if we need to get together again.
Okay. Okay. If you guys are okay with it, it sounds like you are, I can work with the county to produce these presentation deliverables and get this back out to the subcommittee to
And in the,
I think, and this is
in the meantime, you want us to send
back.
You're cutting out a little bit, Ellen.
Yeah, sorry.
Should be okay now.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Bill, were you asking a question?
I was just asking, in the meantime, you want us to send examples of housing or other potential venues, right?
Yes, any illustrative examples you might want to share. If we could get those by next Monday, that would be helpful. Thanks.
Okay.
Cool. Okay, sorry, Andrea, were you, I was just then turning to like, Andrea, have you had a chance to talk to Ed about having the subcommittees, like, I don't know, elect somebody to present, or will everyone be speaking to it, or did you have thoughts on that? Or do you want to present?
I think what we talked about was someone from each subcommittee, maybe appointing a group leader that would present the ideas for the committee.
Mm-hmm.
The other alternative, I think, Ellen, is since you're producing the scenarios, is to maybe ask you to present them. And what's the committee's choice? Anybody?
I think Ellen would do a good job. Maybe it will ease the perception that we all have our own little prejudices.
I think That would be fine with me, but I think we're setting a precedent then for maybe Ellen presents all of them, all three. I think if you do that one,
Right.
Andrea, I think you're kind of setting a precedent for how we'll do these collectively.
That's true.
I was going to say, if Ellen presents them, it'd probably be good to have a representative from the subcommittee who could maybe, if there are deeper questions that they could respond to, instead of having Ellen have to know it all. So
I nominate Clay.
I second.
Would people be comfortable, since Clay's been nominated, maybe even Clay presents and I can maybe just talk to him about his presentation? You know, is that okay with you guys?
Sounds fine.
We
I'm fine.
might,
Okay with me.
yeah, that's okay. We might have to ask Clay. I mean, I feel a little bit like we've, I know that Clay wanted to be on the Mixed Use City Center Subcommittee, and maybe
Okay.
that's the one that he's going to want to present, because I think we got a little sidetracked from focus, which was supposed to be rec event sports center, and went into more of the mixed use. So
That being
Well-
the case,
He may-
I would propose that we ask Bill, who apparently has visited more of these than any of the rest of us combined, or all the rest of us combined. Bill, I'm afraid you kind of spoke up and overqualified yourself here.
Excellent.
I agree.
I didn't sign off early.
Oops, yeah. So you guys, what about this? We have a couple people who I think would be great presenters that seems like you feel comfortable with. And again, you'll all be there, I hope, at the October 8th meeting with the intent that you'll speak to questions or add in details. So this is really just kind of administratively coordinating and making sure we do a smooth presentation. So I would say Bill or Clay, it sounds like, could be somebody we work with on the presentation. And I would just leave it, Andrea, to you and Ed as co-chairs to maybe designate somebody out of the subcommittees to present. And I'm happy to, work with you guys and that person moving forward. But maybe the chairs make that decision based on what the subcommittees are volunteering. Does that sound okay? Okay, and sometimes, this is an example of we're working through this process and what's best and wanting to be really transparent. And I definitely don't want to put words in anybody's mouths while at the same time facilitating us through a complicated process to some conclusion that feels good. So hopefully that's the spirit in which we're doing this. So yeah, so just to wrap up, we have 2 more subcommittee meetings. They'll be done on the 30th. We'll be sending the concepts out to everybody on the committee, a week ahead of the meeting approximately, and then meeting on the 28th at our usual time. And I think with that, I just want to say thanks. That was really good work, and I appreciate everybody's time, and I'll turn it back over to Andrea.
Thanks, Ellen. We really appreciate your skills in this regard. And I'm just going to say the same thing as thank you to all of you, and look forward to going forward. So see you on the 28th.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Have a good rest of your Monday.
Thank you.
Take care.